And we are live.
All right. A little echo.
And continue to get educated and work with OPR on discussions and questions that you all may have. I wanted today to really focus on the workforce development aspect of this and how important it is to continue to build out our early childhood educator workforce to support the larger workforce in Vermont. Again, our businesses represent 45 different economic sectors. We're in all 14 counties across Vermont. We're over 600 members. And we range from really small businesses. In fact, one thing that I always like to point out about VBSR is that actually over half of our business membership has less than 15 full-time employees. So I know that we're thought of as mostly being some of the bigger businesses in the state, but it's important to know that we represent a ton of small business owners also, many of whom especially need access to early childhood education for their families in order to keep their businesses running. So that's the perspective that I'm going to bring into the committee today. From our perspective, this bill will result ultimately in expanding childcare slots with qualified professionals in Vermont's workforce. Parents who are working in every economic sector across the state need support in continuing to stay in Vermont and making sure that we're creating pathways for young Vermonters to stay and raise their families here. We want to make sure that families get access and transparency in the qualifications for educators caring for their young children. As public investment expands in Vermont's access to childcare, Vermont needs to recruit and retain qualified workforce folks to work in these programs. To attract this workforce, early childhood educators in non-public school childcare settings need to be recognized for their skills and qualifications, and they need a clear map for professional growth. They need a workforce development pipeline, right? Just like we create for other professions. Just like OPR has for over 50 other licensures, which they manage, right? So they're the skilled professionals in this. This seems like a really complicated system. If there's anyone in state government that I trust to do it, is OPR, who brought this bill to you all. So I trust them to say that they wouldn't bring it to you if they didn't have the capacity to do it right. As you know, the bill will create individual licensure through Vermont's Office of Professional Regulation for more than 8,000 early childhood educators in non-public school. That's that home and center-based childcare programs. Addressing this regulatory gap in the system ensures that all Vermont children have access to qualified early childhood educators, no matter the childcare setting. This makes early childhood education a stable, attractive career choice for young Vermonters, something that simply cannot be overlooked as both the epidemic of young people leaving our state, while simultaneous us as Vermonters are facing the question of where can they raise a family, right? And we want to make sure that we're also retaining our existing workforce, especially for our VBSR members, right? We need to make sure that this is a situation where they're supporting their employees, where their employees are actually able to stay and work in Vermont and stay employed here. The bill includes retention provisions to help the current workforce increase qualifications over time. Vermont already has many well-prepared early childhood educators who want their expertise to be recognized. So I think that that's something that's also really important here. Education in this sector has been expanding over the past several decades. More and more folks are qualified in this profession and recognized as high-level educators with direct skills that are really important, not just babysitters, right? And so the state itself and early childhood educators are prepared to step into a system, which is something that's so crucial. It's not just being made up from scratch, right? We're here to support an existing workforce. New state data shows that incentives to increase qualifications are already working, with an 8.5% increase in workforce participation and a 22% increase in workforce participants with degrees since Act 76 passed in 2023. Licensure also formally recognizes, again, educators' skills and strengths in the professional status of early childhood education across Vermont. It's also crucial to note that this bill aligns with the framework for a unified national ECE profession. So we're not stepping out as Vermont. We're not creating our own unique standards. We're really trying to be in line with national standards on this, in part because we want to attract new, young, early childhood educators to the state, right? As we're expanding our workforce, let's continue to expand and make sure that in addition to young Vermonters staying here and seeing this as a viable career pathway for themselves, we have early childhood educators who are qualified who are moving to the state too, to continue to fill the need that we have. Because while we have really expanded in incredible ways the availability of early childhood education slots in Vermont since Act 76 passed, I mean, it has been remarkable, the expansion of meeting this need in just the past several years. We know that there are still thousands more slots that need to be filled, right, just to meet current demands. And I can tell you right now that most of our businesses are saying we need more employees. We need more people to be staying here and moving here. And in order for that to be possible, we need more early childhood education slots, not just what currently exists in Vermont. So we need to be really forward thinking about how we're continuing to expand this sector. So new Vermont analysis from Children's First Finance shows that Vermont closed the gap between supply and demand by nearly 2,000 full-time childcare spaces, early childhood education spaces between 2024 and 2026. Statewide access now meets the need of approximately 40% of infants, 70% of toddlers, and 69% of preschoolers likely to require full-time care. So while this does continue to say that we're making real progress, what that also tells us is that 60% of infants are not getting needs met, 30% of toddlers are not getting their needs met, and another 30%, 31% of preschoolers are not getting their needs met currently in Vermont, just right now. So when we're thinking about not only our long-term workforce in the early childhood education sector, what about all of these toddlers, infants, and young folks who need access to the highest quality education to be competitive in the workforce when they enter it in 15 years? Say that they go into a trade at 15, or if they want to go to higher ed, right? If they're going to continue to be competitive, we need highly trained early childhood educators to step into this space and provide the skills that we know are necessary during this crucial learning period for our future workforce development as well. To continue to retain and attract high quality employees to support small and large business owners who are committed to our communities in Vermont, we must be able to say that staying in Vermont is what's best, not only for them, but for their children and their families. VBSR supports S206 because in this bill, we see that we continue to take pragmatic, constructive steps to meet our workforce demand for qualified, well-trained early childhood educators. We urge the committee to pass this important bill to support Vermont businesses and their employees and Vermont families. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for our guest right now? If you feel like hanging out and if something arises, we'll definitely.
That sounds great. And I'm always happy to come back in. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to follow up. Thank you again to your committee for your flexibility. Since I had to call in on Tuesday because of a blizzard, excuse me, I'm sorry that I wasn't able to be here in person. Thanks for fitting me in this morning. I really appreciate it. And so do our members. We really appreciate the time.
And I did see it pop up.
Yeah, it's a question. Hi. I think your perspective is unique because it's not only, the small businesses themselves are often childcare related, but also because your members use those services for females. But so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on I know there are people who are concerned that this is actually going to limit that having these licensure requirements would limit workforce development and would drive people away from, choosing this profession because it's creating barriers. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we actually see the opposite. So what we've seen consistently when OPR creates a licensure is that it creates a workforce pipeline, right? So imagine that you're a teenager in Vermont right now and you're trying to figure out what your next steps are going to be in your career pathway. And you really love education, right? And you see that there's a serious path forward for you in that you love working with children. Would you pick getting a teacher's license who would allow for you to have much more open doors, many more possibilities, but also specific pay grades and protections? Or would you pick a career pathway in education where there's less protections, where there's not a specific pipeline for how you can ultimately move forward in your supported education or systems to support you in further degree attainment, or a structural support from a career professional standpoint, from a workforce standpoint of like having an association that represents you like the teachers do? Which would you pick, right? So even within our own education workforce, I never want to discourage folks from becoming K through 12 teachers. But we really need early childhood educators because we have over 8,000 slots that are currently needed in Vermont in order just to support our kids right now. And so if we're thinking about how are folks going to pick their moves forward, right? Then we need to create an identifiable pathway with clear steps, solid educational goals, and supported scholarship programs and training. And we need to make sure that those folks have a really clear understanding and the support that they need from OPR to move that forward. And we believe, since they do this successfully for over 50 other licensures, that they're very capable of doing it in this instance too.
Any other questions for our guest? Thank you, Kylie.
Thank you all so much, really, again.
All right, up next, Janet McLaughlin. How you doing, Janet?
Slides shared real quick. Okay, I think that works. Okay. Good morning. My name is Janet McLaughlin. I am the Deputy Commissioner within the Department for Children and Families that oversees the Child Development Division. The Child Development Division is the part of DCF that really focuses on young children and their needs. We manage Children's Integrated Services Program, which provides a variety of home and community-based supports for young children who have disabilities, developmental delays, or are at risk of those things like early intervention, home visiting. Included in that is also something called specialized childcare, which really focuses on making sure that those children are getting what they need in their childcare settings. We oversee all things childcare right now. So that includes childcare licensing, childcare financial assistance. We have significant efforts around childcare capacity and quality. And then we also co-administer universal pre-kindergarten with the Agency of Education. So that's our division. And we've been asked to come in and comment on S206. I'm going to share a little bit more background information based on what I heard of the committee conversation on what some of the questions are that are coming up in terms of what our role is, what the current rules are. Happy to answer those questions as I'm able to. And then also we'll share some observations that the division has on this proposed legislation. This was proposed by the Office of Professional Regulation. This is not the administration's bill. So I'm just sharing observations at this moment. Okay. Overall, in terms of context, in terms of regulated childcare in Vermont, I just want to be clear, right? We have a little over 1,000 regulated childcare programs in the state. We have different license types. Different license types have different rules and requirements associated with them, right? We are licensing the program as the Secretary of State's office was talking about, right? So we have 509 center-based childcare programs, about 400 registered and licensed family childcare programs, and we have 150 after-school programs that are regulated by the Child Development Division. And those are sort of, you could think of that as, it's called after-school programs, but you could just think of it as like school-age childcare because it could be after school, it could be summertime. The current well, it says the current license capacity. This data is as of December 31st. So the actual number of programs and the licensing capacity changes almost every day, but every week maybe. But we have about 34,000 licensed spaces. The majority of them are in our center-based programs. About 4,000 of them are in our family childcare homes, and about 10,000 regulated after-school program spaces. And this visual to the right is also just wanted to make sure you guys know about this. It is a searchable map that's available on our website for if you want to look up what are the regulated programs in your communities, what age they serve, are they universal pre-kindergarten partner, what their level of quality is. This map is available to you to be able to look up all that information and sort and filter. So overall, in terms of we've licensed childcare programs. I know this was part of the discussion yesterday, right? But what it says in the or 2 days ago, it says in the regulations, right, is a person providing care for children from more than 2 families other than their own must be registered or licensed in accordance with these regulations. So that's how we talk about it. I know there was a lot of discussion about where the number is. We regulate all childcare facilities in the state that don't need an exemption. I wanted to just add on to what OPR shared the other day. We do license childcare that are run by churches. We do license childcare that are run by hospitals. We do license after-school programs, but there are exemptions in certain cases, right? So you're not, you don't need to have a childcare license to, run Sunday school, even though you do that on a regular basis for for children under 5. You don't need, if you are, have groups of children coming together as patients in a hospital, they don't need to be regulated. If the hospital is running a childcare program for its employees, yes, you do need to be regulated by CDD. So I just wanted to make it clear there's, in the regulations, there's a whole page that's listed to all the exceptions that are there that are, hopefully designed to be something that makes sense and creates some consistency around the kinds of programs that we're regulating.
Rebecca?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a little bit different than what we heard, and I was gonna question that as well. So just to reiterate, if a church runs a daycare program, it is licensed by you all. But if they're just running a babysitting service for Sunday mass or something.
That's right.
Then it does not.
And it doesn't need to be.
That's what I thought, but I want to make sure of that. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Mm-hmm. And in this, for school age childcare for the summer, there also are a lot of summer camps that are operated that are exempt because it needs to be longer than reference 10 weeks or 12 weeks right this second of continuous operation. So there are a number of summer camps that are running officially without regulation for the state for children who have completed kindergarten is the current regulation. So it's, but there are also a bunch of them that are regulated by the Child Development Division because you do need to be regulated by us to be eligible for childcare financial assistance. So for those families that want to be able to take advantage of that program to cover the costs, then those programs need to be regulated. Overall, the regulations, right, are designed to provide a foundation for health and safety for the healthy development of young children. The regulations are driven by federal and state statutes and rules, as well as best practice standards from the American Academy of Pediatrics. I wanted to clarify a little bit about the current standards related to individuals within child licensing. CDD does approve and monitor everyone who's working in regulated childcare programs right now. We do approve individuals to work in specific roles that are based on standards laid out in the childcare licensing regulations. And we, at this moment, we contract with Northern Lights at Community College of Vermont to verify qualifications, people's annual professional development hours, the required training and required trainings, and that informs the approval to work in specific positions and that to maintain compliance with state and federal standards. So this is work that partially is partially already being done through a process that we have within childcare licensing and a partnership we have with the Community College of Vermont. So the question is changing, how valuable do we think changing it is? This bill will require some significant changes in how we do our work, and how we approach our supports for early childhood education staff. And I'm just saying that as like a fact-based statement. I know that I took my own stab at drawing a picture. We'll see if you guys think this picture is helpful or not. But our sense is that, our estimate is that this bill could impact as many as around 5,300 people that are working in early childhood education. So right now, we have about 4,500 people working in community-based, center-based childcare and preschool programs. Those are, also known as private ones, but again, they could all have different ownership structures. So I like to say community-based versus private. Many of them are nonprofits. There's about 800 people working in family childcare who would be included in this bill, but the 1,700 people that are in public school operated programs are exempt from this bill because the schools have a different way, right, that they are looking at qualifications. Obviously for their lead teachers, but also for their paraprofessionals, right? A lot of this bill is about those folks that aren't that like the top of the requirements, but it's creating that pathway for people who are at different levels within the profession, right? When it comes to caring for young children, you need a lot of eyes, you need a lot of hands to be able to make sure kids are kept safe. So it's really the two darker greens are the people that, in our estimation, would be impacted by this bill. And I wanted to just highlight related to, because I know there's the conversations about, the AOE educator licensure. So again, I tried to make this picture right. There are about 1,700 people in the state that hold Agency of Education licensures with an early childhood education, early childhood special education endorsement. And they work in all sorts of settings, right? So some of those people are working in a private center-based childcare program. And again, as they're saying, that licensure, that AOE license would make them an EC3. They wouldn't have to go through additional processes there. There are people working in family childcare programs who are AOE licensed teachers. In fact, the majority of family childcare programs that participate in the Universal Pre-Kindergarten program, the owner of that program is an AOE licensed teacher themselves. And then obviously within public schools, again, you've got a subset of those people that hold their AOE teaching license. But again, there's a ton of paraprofessionals, right, and aides in those early childhood classrooms. And then obviously there's people that hold those licenses that aren't working directly with children, right? They have all sorts of other jobs, working for agencies, working in higher education, being consultants, all sorts of other things, right? You could do when you have your teaching license. So I just wanted to try to share our sense of who it is we're talking about, right? So it's not the people in the red circle, and it is the folks that are in the dark green and not in the red circle. Which I would offer from our perspective, like that's already pretty clear in our heads because we think about this all day long. And I think that there's a lot of people in the field who also are very clear on this, even though I know this is a big learning curve for folks that haven't spent the last 10 years thinking about this. Okay, I have a few major points that I want to make that I think are what we see as the major implications of this bill. So the first is that this bill fundamentally changes the decision-making authority related to who is qualified to work in early childhood settings. Yeah. Right now, the Child Development Division, it's a rulemaking process and puts it into, that then goes into state level regulations, right? So me as a political appointee, right, is the person that gets to sign off, that essentially helps lead that process, gets to sign off on it. And it moves it instead, right, to an OPR supported oversight board. That's a big change. So want to make sure that was clear. Our observations, right, is that that does seem to align with the process that there is for teachers and for other professions. It does connect that decision making to people that have relevant credentials. It does leverage the Office of Professional Recognition's expertise and some of their existing systems. But it does also limit our flexibility as a state, right? Right now, the role for CDD, we can set the rules, we can do emergency rules, we can grant variances, we can respond to concerns sort of directly. So that's some of the things we're observing as we look at this proposal.
I got a hand from Rep. Larson.
So when you say it limits the role for CDD and setting the rules and stuff, is it limited because that ability is then moving to OPR to make those decisions?
Yes.
Okay. And is there communication or collaboration between OPR and CDD, or would there be regarding all of these things? Or
Yeah, we have discussed, we've discussed this bill with them from sort of a practical perspective. And, they've assured us that for other professions or other sort of similar places where there sort of is shared, right, there might be theoretically complementary, right, regulatory frameworks that they do include, CDD would be a close partner in terms of developing the rules, helping, advise the board. One of our comments later on is that that's work for us. That's not necessarily laid out or contemplated in what's been proposed right now. So I think there is absolutely a place where there could be a close partnership, but when COVID happened, right? CDD was able to establish an expedited variance related to some qualification, some of the qualifications or some of the elements of the qualifications really quickly. I know that was obviously, hopefully, not a common occurrence, but that was an example of a place where we were able to sort of able to respond quickly. And I think it's unclear to me how quickly OPR would be able to respond in a situation like that.
thanks.
Okay. Okay. The second major area, I think, is around transparency and accountability. This proposal would make qualifications for individual early childhood educators clear and public in a way that they are not right now. And so, what we're seeing, what we can see is that this would provide clear, consistent, sort of publicly available information about those who are serving our youngest children. It would, we can see how it would leverage the Office of Professional Recognition's processes to make unprofessional conduct easier to identify and address. Again, right now, we're going to see, right, we license the program, and we do have ways that we can prohibit somebody from working in childcare, that we can, add some extra requirements for them require extra training before they're allowed to return to a role, or we have some tools, but it's not public, right? It's not transparent. It's not public necessarily. We don't have a vehicle to be able to make that transparent as transparent as maybe some people would like. It seems like it would provide clear standards related to higher education and also career and technical education. Right now, when you look at childcare licensing regulations, the regulations are really long, partially because we can't know exactly what the training program is that people have been through. And so you just are really explicit in the regulations about what every single thing is. There is a place where maybe we could pare some of that back if there was a clearer, if there were clear standards for in terms of what, and directors could be confident of this is the training that this person has had. We also do a lot of workforce development work and support a lot of programs for people at all phases of their early childhood education career. It could provide some additional guidance that would make that clear. We do understand that it could be confused with some of the different AOE credentials, either whether or not that is, the AOE educator's license. I know they're thinking about how they're doing credentialing related to paraprofessionals. Like there is some potential for confusion there. And at the end, I've got a recommendation. And I just want to flag again that it would require us to revise our childcare licensing regulations to align with sort of the scope of practice and qualifications requirements that are within this, which again is not, I think you are the committee that is probably like most appreciative of just how much work it is to do those pieces in terms of moving things through the bureaucratic process to make them official. So we could see that over sort of a 10-year period of time, we might need to sort of layer in the OPR requirements and then layer out some of the other pathways that we have right now. Because right now we have sort of multiple ways that you could become a lead teacher or multiple ways you could become a teacher assistant.
So thank you.
Can you reiterate what the current path is to investigate complaints about individual employees, not the centers that you regulate?
Yeah. So right now, if we get a complaint in about a individual employee, it does, we have to assess if it is something that we would refer to Family Services Division, to the child abuse and neglect. And if an individual's behavior is sort of rising to that level of concern, we refer, or we partner, and then we do a co-investigation with RSLI, that is the unit within FSD that does the investigations. If it's really serious, we're also bringing in law enforcement, right, as a partner. So that's currently what we do if it's becoming more serious. There are definitely places though, right, where things are, they're very concerning, but they're not going to rise to a child abuse and neglect standard. That's a higher standard than we have, a higher standard of proof. And it's not, and if it's not getting there, it's probably not getting to law enforcement level, right? And so it's that group of folks sort of where it's with child abuse and neglect substantiation, and we can't get to any sort of law enforcement action. But those folks, we don't have we can cite that program for not following a standard, and it could be a lot of different things, right? It could be specifically about that child's behavior. It could be about not doing the mandated reporting you needed to do, not doing a self-report to the division that you needed to do on a specific incident. But that's for the program. And then for the individual, we are able to say, we have elements within our childcare licensing that do allow us to prohibit somebody from working within, to say this person's prohibited from working in childcare, based on information known to the division. And the way that ends up playing out is if that person went to apply to work at another regulated childcare program in Vermont, then we say, nope, we already know you, you're prohibited. But if it's just information known to the division, they're able to say to us, here's my corrective action plan, and ask to be off of that list. And it's not like a transparent process. Also, if that person wanted to do another job with children that wasn't within a regulated childcare setting, that information wouldn't be known to other people.
So like if they wanted to go work and be a paraeducator at a school, that wouldn't be known to AOE?
Not if they were working within a pre-K program, because we do co-administer that, we would know. But if they were working with school-age children, that information wouldn't necessarily be known.
So would this shift to OPR licensing make that more transparent in those situations?
I would think so. I guess that's a question probably for OPR and for school district employers. But I guess it would be whether or not they would then be checking the OPR registry for one of their, to their process.
So would your division have to report to OPR under this?
We would be working really closely with OPR on that. Yeah, we would, if we had something that we felt like was a potential violation of, a potential professional practice concern, we would refer to OPR, and then we would figure out how to handle that investigation, similar to what we do with FSD, do with law enforcement, we do it with Agency of Education. So
You do work with AOE, so why would you not be reporting any of this type of conduct to AOE if the individual, or why would they not be asking you, I guess, if the individual wanted to work in the public school system?
yeah, I think, right, we got a lot of, I don't know if you guys know, we have a lot of school districts, we have a lot of employers, right? So all of them coming to us, like they don't have necessarily, I can find out more, but I don't think it's within their practice for every single school district to check with us to say, is this person one of the 10 people on the prohibited persons list?
Yeah, I would think that that would be a pretty simple thing for a school district to do if they're hiring, to just have access to their list.
Yeah, I think I need to check with legal on, again, our ability to share those individual names in the current construct. I'm not saying that it's not a solvable problem. I'm just saying in the current construct.
Just thinking with my school board hat. Thank you.
Rep. Nugent?
I'm just curious, if CDD were to tackle this challenge or need, what you would, if you can comment on, how it would be different or what you'd do.
If this were to go through, I think we would need to work really closely with Office of Professional Regulation on building out the requirements, including that we've got a lot of federal requirements on our side. And so there'd be a lot of questions about whether or not those federal childcare requirements get built into this, or are they built in, or do they stay on childcare licensing side? If they stay on the childcare licensing side, whose job is it to check? Are we bringing do we still maintain a contract with Community College of Vermont to check on people's, infant CPR certifications, that those are up to date? Or do we decide to handle that in a different way? So there would be a lot for us to figure out. I don't know that we're saying that the process we have right now is like the best, most efficient system. I can guarantee you it's not the most efficient system, but it would certainly be work to change it. So I think we would have to figure out what those systems would be, again, figure out what that partnership with, again, right now we've been using Community College of Vermont to do that work for us. And then, and if some of it is going to OPR, what does that mean for us? And then, again, we would need to update our childcare licensing regulations to reflect the new standards. And again, probably, I think in the transition period, we layer in some additional pathway. We make it clear that having one of these transitional license, meets these particular roles, but potentially these others. And then we layer that out. And then we would be able to, maybe right away, but I think over time, take away we would have to take away some of the other alternate pathways that we have identified right now. I think we would share what we've learned about those alternate pathways, right, with the board that was developing the standards for what the equivalencies are. So that's some of the work. That's some of the work we'd have to do. So.
Rep. Pisano?
So
you qualify the home, the facility.
Yes.
So you're making sure the facility is up and running. Why, if these regulations were gonna pass for the licensure of the teachers, why would that not fall into your program
Mhm.
instead of OPR making sure that, I mean, I can see my OPR making sure that they have the license, but the fee to have the license, but the credentials and it's like a duplication of services stuff. I'm just trying to like
Mhm.
visualize, like, you got the facility, but then they've got the inside. It's like you got the four walls, but then they're gonna be in charge of the inside. Why wouldn't you be in charge of the whole thing, making sure that, yes, they've got their license and they're all qualified and they're all set?
I think that is closer to what, I think that is close to what they're saying, is that they would be saying, they would be saying this person has that license, that information would hopefully seamlessly, by magic technology, like we would have that available to us, that this person has their license. And we could say, okay, we're clear, that person is the lead teacher for that classroom. That person's only qualified to be the assistant teacher in that classroom. That person's qualified to be a program director. And because the program director in our structure has a lot of authority, like that is the person that is responsible for making sure that the rules and regulations are followed and that our children are safe. So I think that is what they're saying, of like, this is just would be a different way, instead of us saying to Community College of Vermont, please evaluate this person's transcript and their standards against this set of rules, we would be saying to them, instead, we would just know from OPR that OPR would pay that function for the majority of the people in the field. I made it any clear though.
It makes it clear, but to me, it's again, it's like a duplication of services, like why wouldn't you combine it all into one agency instead of two agencies? Just trying to think outside the box.
Just, because currently CDD does the licensing and that would include the background checks
Correct.
and fingerprinting. How long does that take currently?
Yeah.
Where are we at?
Long time. Fingerprint supported criminal history checks, right, that are required by federal statute. And, at a very specific standard, right, in Vermont, those need to be done through the Vermont Crime Information Center. Right now, I think we're getting back, CED's getting back results that were submitted in fingerprints that were submitted or taken in February. We're getting those results back right now. So it takes longer than it should, and it impacts programs' capacity.
What's the federal standard on that? Do you know?
So you might know more. You might know the exact words better than I do, but I mean, they have to be it needs to be an FBI criminal history check. And then we also need the fingerprint supported in-state check as well. And then for people that have lived out of state in the last 5 years, they also need out-of-state checks if that FBI check is not part of the national fingerprint file or something like that. So it's like, it's.
Are we meeting the federal standard right now in Vermont?
No, we're not meeting the federal standard so we're meeting the federal standard in terms of what we check,
Yeah.
but in terms of the federal standard, in terms of the timeline in which we need to be delivering this, returning results back to people and programs, we're not meeting that standard right now. We do have we have a plan. We had a multi-agency group that started working together probably last June, and it was DCF, Agency of Digital Services, Vermont Crime Information Center, Office of Professional Recognition, Agency of Education, like really saying like, what are the issues? Where are the rubs? What's the challenge? And so through that, we decided the first thing that we need to do is we really need to make sure that VCIC has the technology that it needs. Because right now the system is based on paper. It's based on mailing. It's based on mailing things from where the fingerprints are taken to to VCIC. VCIC doesn't have technology that's moving things through the system. They are literally people in batches, dragging things from one file folder to the next, checking things. And then the results literally get printed out and put in the mail back to the requesting agencies. So technology is critical to the solution. We have, I think the RFP request for proposals will go out this month for a technology solution that can ideally return back 90% of results within 5 days. So that should be a major improvement. We raised through the preschool development grant that the Child Development Division earned last December. We were able to include funds for this. So we got $1 million of money from that. So we are working really hard on this. I think the next phase is to look at areas where there might be, people might be required to have duplicate print, 2 sets of fingerprints for similar purposes. That is a much sort of larger legal question because of some of the federal rules around sharing results between agencies. And so we decided we wanted to focus first on just the speed of the system. The technology is needed no matter what. And then we can work on whether if we need to change.
Okay, and just another for the like ECE, the early childhood educator certification. Is there anything that stops people right now from doing that voluntarily?
Oh, no, we have lots of people that meet these standards.
So
So
it doesn't need to be regulated in if they could voluntarily do it.
It just depends on where you want the minimum standards to be placed. So, right. I mean, that's the question is where should the minimum standards be, which is a great transition to my next slide. Anybody? Okay.
Segue.
So in terms of this bill, like, right, our observations, right, this does increase the educator qualifications. And again, it's going to depend on your personal opinions on whether or not you see that as a good thing or an unnecessary thing, right? But it does increase the minimum qualifications in child serving roles, and it's in alignment, but it is in alignment with the national framework, the unifying framework for early childhood education. And so when we look at what those qualifications are, and as we just are evaluating them as policy people ourselves, right, we can see that it does align with the evidence on quality, early childhood education and child development. It aligns with national best practices, and it aligns with the national early childhood education competencies. We already use those competencies in our state, right? Those are the competencies that are built into the AOE teacher licensure. Those are the competencies that are built into our, call it our early childhood career ladder that we have within the state. That's part of what that group at CCV is evaluating against. But this uses them in a different way. I mentioned this earlier, but I can see that it may allow us to simplify our licensing regulations and regulatory practice in the future if we can be more confident in the consistency of training and skills for folks within the field. We do see that it will require additional post-secondary work and potentially expenses for some folks who are currently in the field, and for those considering entering. It may deter some from entering or growing in the field, but it may also support retention and reduce turnover, right? If you know what you're doing, if your colleagues know what they're doing, if you're able to manage, the challenging environments with young children better, maybe you'll stay longer. So this is one of those ones where it is really difficult to predict what that impact will be, when that's going to be felt as a burden or a support, and it's probably going to be some of each. So that's just, we share that. I mean, we share that same sort of wondering that people have around, what impact could it have? Just a few final observations. I want to offer that Agency of Education has raised what appear to us to really be valid concerns about the confusion of naming this licensed early childhood educator, and specifically the ECE abbreviation. And just based on the way that they have, and you can ask them, but really based on just the way they name things, the way things are used in sort of shorthand in schools, the way things are used in interstate compacts, they've flagged that would be confusing. And their request and CDD is supportive of this is potentially an alternative title of early childhood education professional and using an abbreviation of ECP as a potential way through there.
Sorry, could you explain why it would be confusing?
Yeah, I mean, AOE is probably the best people to talk on this, right? But right now you get a lot of people who have a state teaching license from AOE, like they would refer to themselves as saying like, oh, I have an ECE, like I have an ECE license. Like that's the shorthand that they would use right now. They also
And what does it stand for in that
Sorry.
context?
it stands for early childhood educator.
Okay, so it would be two separate professions essentially having the same title?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, what we're saying is these are the same. I mean, ultimately, what this bill is saying is it's the same profession. There's just two different pathways depending on what setting you're working in, right? Because so if you're going to be a lead teacher in a public school, we are saying this is the pathway you need to have. It needs to be more similar. It needs to be most similar to other public school educators. And if you're, but if you're going to be working with infants and toddlers in a community-based program, your training, your experience, your credentials, should add up to something as well. And that would be through OPR. But essentially, it's all based from the same competencies. So I wouldn't necessarily think of it as two different professions. It's just two different pathways based on the primary setting you're planning to work in and what your role is.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I'm struggling with this. I don't come across
it's okay.
education stuff all that often. So to say that if they're doing essentially the same job and it's just two different pathways to get them there,
Mhm.
I don't understand why they can't be called the same thing. Or what would be the confusion?
Yeah, I mean, I think Agency of Education would be able to speak to this the best, but that is definitely their concern, is that relative to the way that school district employers are, and like the hiring process that they use and the language that they're using, the language that's using in some of the interstate compacts and things like that, that it could cause confusion. That's their main concern about this bill, is just that potential confusion.
Okay, all right, well, we'll have an opportunity to ask AOE.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
okay.
Oh, they are certainly on the punch list.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
I want to flag now that the current draft now includes an option for sort of an evergreen option for transitional licenses for those that are working in family childcare homes. That's something that when I testified on the Senate side was something that we flagged as a potential concern, right? Because we do want to create some space for people who are changing careers and that potentially could start contributing to the field right away, but they might benefit for some additional time and support, right, to be able to complete the steps needed to earn their license. So we appreciated seeing that change that came in from the Senate side as an additional pathway for people that want to start a family childcare home. And then the final piece, which I've mentioned a couple of times, right, it's just that this will require, I just want to flag, right, this will require significant work for the Child Development Division. We'd have to adapt our licensing regulations and our practices. We'd have to adjust our workforce registry function and how we monitor it. And we would need to sort of adapt and extend our workforce development initiatives to prepare the workforce for these changes. So it's just, this is definitely work for us. I mean, so we wanted to make sure that that's, considered if this is moving forward. We already do a ton in terms of workforce development. We offer scholarships, we have apprenticeships, we fund tuition. There's a lot of pathways, a lot of supports that we're providing for people that want to get college credits, earn their credentials already. But obviously we would need to potentially, realign those and focus those a little differently if this changed.
Any further questions? Representative Morgan, then Mark Evans.
Yeah, just a quick question, kind of a blunt question. I listened on her testimony I get the impression you're trying to like the bill, but you find some flaws. And so I would say that, and I don't want to speak for you,
Mhm.
my impression is, well, I don't know. I'm getting a mixed message. I'm overall, would you, I guess I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
Does CDD support this, or are they a bit opposed to it? I'm taking you maybe a bit opposed to it
Mm.
overall.
I mean, our official position right now on this bill is neutral. I just want you guys to have like fact-based information to be able to make your decision. And, I think, the governor's office, it has concerns about the impact on capacity. And we need to, really see the final bill to make a decision.
Okay.
But yeah, so there's that. And I think I would also just offer, right, this is part of a national movement. And so Vermont would be, among the first states to do this as a professional license. I certainly don't, if my tea leaves is this is probably where the field is headed over the next 20 years, 30, you know what I mean? Like, and so the question is if, but this would be, when Vermont would end up being the first state to do this.
Sure. Yeah, and that's exactly the
Yeah.
concern I have, is I want to make sure we don't jump off the cliff without a parachute. And so I'm taking all that into concern. I'm just want to ask the blunt question, but thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ooh, I'm sorry, yes. Question from Representative Evans.
I have a last question. So if I understand that would increase the workload to make the transition, but my understanding from earlier in your testimony is that there would be less work in the future because some of that would be transitioned to OPR. So it would be kind of a temporary increase in figuring it out, but then in the long run, you would actually have less responsibility over this segment of.
That's right. I think there would be transitional, yes, I think
Okay.
transitional work. I mean, and I think, again, our current system was also like literally just like the processes and the procedures were like built during the time when they're like before before the world of technology that we have right now. And so, right, the opportunity to build more efficient systems, it could make us all much more efficient, if, because, again, this current system where we've got kind of an outdated system for CDD that then we partner with Community College of Vermont, and then it comes back to there's some places where certainly there could be some efficiency and building something new and with new information, with new technology. I think we find that sometimes helps.
Rep Pistol.
Is there a licensure fee for the daycares?
No.
That's what I want to know.
That's your answer. Anything else? Nope. Thank you so much. That was a lot of very useful information. Let's see. And we are shifting over to Jen Olson, who is joining us via Zoom. How are you, Jen?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
So I believe you received a written copy of my testimony and also an op-ed letter from earlier this year. Okay, if I get started?
Please.
Okay, great. So just again, I'm Jen Olson. I am a co-teaching director at Corey Hill School in Middlebury, which is a small nonprofit preschool. I have been teaching for about 18 years in private center-based programs throughout Vermont. And I've spent approximately half of those years working with infants and toddlers and the other half with preschoolers. I've also mentored students in UVM's Early Childhood Education undergraduate degree program, Vermont's Higher Education Collaborative Program, and have been closely involved with the initiative to advance ECE as a profession over the last several years. I also have a bachelor's degree in early childhood education and a master's degree in educational leadership. And I am a parent of a 3-year-old, and I live with my family in Heinsberg. So I really appreciate you taking the time to hear from me today. Don't hesitate to ask questions should they come up. I'm here to express my full support for Bill S-206 to create a licensed profession of early childhood education in Vermont. Professional recognition is critical for standing up an early childhood education system that centers equity for children, families, and educators. This bill can actually simplify regulations and make the system easier for early childhood educators to navigate while simultaneously making it easier for families to understand their educators' qualifications. Since 2019, I have been a member of the Advancing ECE as a Profession Task Force here in Vermont. This has been really a pleasure to participate in, really meaningful work that fills my cup. This has involved collaborating with early childhood educators from center-based programs and family child care homes the entire time. This bill is truly a grassroots effort to ask for what we early childhood educators want and for what we believe is most beneficial to children and families. Originally, I became a member of the task force because I believe professional licensure can strengthen the ECE system, ensuring that there are qualified educators for the children of today and tomorrow. And that's an extension of the work that I chose to do as a mentor teacher in multiple ways, working with undergraduate students and students who are, or educators who are wanting to enter the field, because we need to have a future workforce. And the process that the task force has undergone has been incredibly affirming to feel the enthusiasm and support and critical thinking that educators across the state are engaging in to talk about professionalization, to think critically about the future of our workforce and the ECE ecosystem that serves children and families and how we can do that better. The meetings have been full of honest dialogue and reflections about what it would take to professionalize. And throughout that process, the task force would meet and reflect on what we've heard and essentially capture the conversations with the workforce and then bring them back to the workforce to ensure that we were hearing them correctly and then amplify our collective voice. And in doing so, we've made sure that we're bringing everyone along, which feels really critical and essential to building a strong workforce. I know that you have probably heard about the myriad of ways in which early childhood educators enter the field and how they hold qualifications, and it is muddy and unclear, difficult to communicate. I personally received my undergraduate degree from UVM in early childhood education, and they are an institution that licenses teachers through their degree program. So upon graduation, you submit a portfolio to demonstrate competency that recommends you for licensure through the Agency of Education with an endorsement in early childhood education, allowing them to be a lead teacher in classrooms from birth to grade 3. So that's what my ECE license is. And with regard to the question that was posed to Janet earlier, just want to note that when I present myself as a prospective employer, I let people know, like, I'm a licensed teacher. I'm the pre-K licensed teacher. I have a license through AOE in early childhood education. And I've had that license for 18 years now, and have always chosen to work in private center-based programs that align with my teaching philosophy and values. There are folks who I know who have, I graduated with, same degree, who are a second grade teacher. So our paths were the same. They afford us that range of options for teaching. And as I just mentioned, this AOE license also enables me to be a pre-K teacher, and through the universal pre-K program for the preschool program that I work at any given time, to be a pre-K partner. Being an AOE licensed educator also involves demonstrating competency and professional growth through licensure renewal. And in general, I have found as an early childhood educator, it is easy to communicate my qualifications to potential employers and prospective families, because that designation is like so robust and is sort of held with like, oh, okay, cool. Like, we know who is overseeing you and that you've gone through some, maybe not rigorous, but like that you've gone through an approved training program. But the reality is that the majority of center-based teachers and family child care home providers do not hold AOE licensure. And for them, there is no shared system or common language to demonstrate qualifications. And that makes it incredibly difficult to articulate to families what those qualifications are. And it can be really challenging as the educator yourself to understand what your career pathway could be. When we regulate educators by the same standards, regardless of whether they work at home, in a center, or school, we shift the focus to what truly matters, the competencies educators need to serve young children. In my role as a center-based director, professional licensure streamlines the hiring process. Currently, that process involves combing through a teacher's resume or CV to consider their experience, their education, their professional development, maybe aligning it with the Northern Lights Career Ladder here in Vermont. And that's just to determine if the person is indeed qualified to do the position that we're hiring for. Licensure would change that. We would be able to look at the designation of their license and quickly determine if they are qualified for the position. The rest of the details remain important. They support the interview process, determining a goodness of fit, and if hired, supporting them in finding meaningful professional development opportunities that further any goals that they've identified, which is a really big part of retention. As center directors and colleagues, we want to strengthen the quality of ECE programs and the individuals in our field by retaining our teachers and building pipelines that encourage and facilitate teachers, no matter their level, to feel supported and challenged throughout their career. Janet spoke a little bit about this just before, about how professional licensure also creates a system of individual accountability. There is some nuance to how, when violations are reported to or by CDD, it can be on the program, not on the individual, despite the fact that the violation may have been specific to the actions of one staff member. I won't go into a lot more detail there because she certainly is more of the authority on that. But as she did say, that it's not public knowledge, and individual licensure makes certain that educators abide by an ethical code of conduct, and that the citation would presumably be recorded with their license and then be available for public knowledge. Licensure also breaks down barriers for prospective families by simplifying the way we articulate qualifications of staff to potential families, which in turn allows families to make more informed decisions about the care of their child. And I want to share an example. So as a center-based director, we think about how we market ourselves to prospective families. We recognize the importance of articulating staff qualifications, and yet it's incredibly challenging to do that when, you know, right now, like Corey Hill staff is 6 teachers, and there are several different pathways and experiences and credentials of those 6 people. If I imagine working at a program that had upwards of 30 staff, that task becomes really daunting, if not impossible. If you add in turnover, it makes it even harder to think about how often you're updating that. In many cases, it forces the hands of center directors to share little or nothing about staff qualifications in the materials that they share with prospective families. And maybe some nuanced conversations might happen when families are touring a center, but it's really hard to explain in plain language. And so the designations put forward in S206, like ECE 1, 2, and 3, can become as well known to the general public as those in the nursing profession, like CNA, LNP, and RN. And that would be a tremendously positive shift for families and educators alike. Now, in a similar vein, with my parent hat on, I did mention earlier that I have a child. He's 3.5. His name is Wesley. And, you know, about 4 years ago, when I was newly pregnant and thinking about how I was hoping to return to the workforce after I had my maternity leave, I was looking for childcare. I am searching through website after website after website, only to find that a few out of a dozen nearby programs say anything about who the staff is or their qualifications. And that's just like at the point when I'm thinking, I want to see if this is a place that I'd be willing to like get on a wait list, pay a fee to, you know, hold a spot, like anything. I don't know who these people are. And I feel both in that moment so grateful that I'm an insider and I know why that is the way that it is. And also so devastated that that's the current reality for children and families. As parents, we deserve more. We deserve to have enough information to make an informed decision about who's going to care for our child during the most critical window of their development. I'm here with you today because what I want is for the 8,000 early childhood educators in Vermont who currently have no system of individual regulation, and for everyone considering this career in the future to be supported by clear career pathways, accountability, and transparency through individual regulation under OPR. Our childcare system is vital to this state, and it deserves a strong, stable workforce. I have never walked into a hospital, doctor's office, or other healthcare setting unsure of the qualifications or credentials of the professionals treating my son. I want the same confidence when I walk into an early childhood program, regardless of its setting. And I want to know that educators are highly qualified, well compensated, and accountable. Professionalizing the early childhood education workforce gives families that assurance, and it gives educators the recognition that they deserve for this really important work that they do. And in closing, I also just wanted to respond to another question that had come up before with Janet around the duplication of services. I made a couple of references throughout the testimony to the nursing profession. And so what I recognize is that, for example, OPR regulates nurses, but another agency regulates the healthcare settings that they work in. S206 is, essentially doing the same thing, but with a different profession in different settings, which is that OPR would be regulating early childhood educators, but CDD would be regulating the childcare facilities that they work in. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Does anybody at the table have questions for the witness?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And if you'd like to stay on, you're more than welcome to listen to the rest of the testimony.
Thank you.
Next, we have Christina Nelson. Good morning, Christina. How are you?
Good morning. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
My name's Chris Nelson, and I live in and own a family childcare home in North Troy in Orleans County. I've been an advocate for childcare in general and rural family childcare specifically for years. I've been providing care and education to families in my community for over 30 years, which is long enough now that I care for the children of the families who originally came. I facilitate a statewide peer network of 47 family childcare leaders, caring for roughly 480 Vermont children. Our network members are deeply connected to our rural communities, providing continuity and support for families in areas where there aren't many options. We are your family childcare experts. I am representing many of the family childcare colleagues in our support of S206, the Early Childhood Educator Profession Bill. Some have supported professional licensure from the beginning. Some have supported after the advocacy added family childcare to the license option last year. When people learn about the provisions in the bill to support family childcare, I found skeptics usually become supporters. While we may have differences in opinion about some things, we are aligned on this. We want professional recognition, and we want to ensure that our voices are heard. We are often spoken for, but we can speak for ourselves. We know the system inside and out, and we know how policy changes under Act 76 have improved our work. Those of us who have helped shape the legislation have been following this bill, and I know it will impact us, and we're working to share that information with our peers. Thank you for inviting me today to listen to family childcare from rural Vermont. We are your experts in family childcare throughout the state of Vermont. We care for hundreds of Vermont's youngest children. We keep families in our rural communities working in places like ours. When childcare is available, parents can work. When it's not, local businesses feel it immediately. Family childcare has always filled the gaps, extending hours, providing after-school care, being the steady support for our communities. For decades, we've been the constant, flexible option that makes it possible for families and local economies to function. The unique and wonderful thing about Vermont's mixed delivery early childhood education system is that we have autonomy within our regulations. That means that families seeking regulated childcare can choose a setting that works best for their family. Every family is different, and they know the needs of their children. And sometimes family childcare is the best fit, and it's the best quality. Family childcare owners are not asking for less regulation. We work with vulnerable populations, and we should be regulated, and we're familiar with regulations. What we want is to have a voice in our own regulation and equal access to the opportunities that come with being part of a recognized profession. And that's what S206 does. Individual professional licensure creates a system where opportunities for family childcare educators are the same as the opportunities for center-based educators. At its core, this bill is about equal opportunities. We spent a long time trying to unite the childcare system and share opportunities, and that's what this bill does. To put an even sharper point on it, this legislation will ensure that families living in rural communities have access to the same quality as those in more urban parts of our state. It does not mean that we create a system where opportunities for family childcare are different from opportunities for center-based care. Instead, it creates the conditions for choice, allowing educators and families to select the path that works best for them. People sometimes point to family childcare programs closing, and nationally, they are. In Vermont, they were, up until a couple years ago. Contrary to popular belief, this was not due to overregulation. It was because resources were funneled into larger population areas. Historically, the change in rural Vermont hasn't been regulation, it's been access to resources. Act 76 shifted the balance and sent a lot more resources to family childcare, and recent data shows family childcare is growing, which reflects what we see in our communities. When resources and supports are available, family childcare will grow. If S206 takes effect, opening career opportunities to early childhood educators statewide, that helps family childcare, rural family childcare. We're proud of our independent businesses and the value to our communities. The quality of our home programs are on par with any other kind of childcare program. Like any professional, we want a clear way to demonstrate that quality. We would love to be able to show families a professional license to practice. And yes, renewing a license every couple of years will have a cost and a task. But if that makes our practice better, if that means access to opportunities that we don't currently have, then we'll gladly do it. If it strengthens our practice and expands our opportunities, it'll be well worth it. There are many young people eager to enter the profession. One of their biggest obstacles are parents who are worried about investing in a training for a career that won't be sustainable. If we professionalize early childhood education, including family childcare, we change that calculation. We open the doors to those who want to do this work, but need a viable career path. We're so close. I'll end by saying quality is not determined by the door a child walks through. It's determined by the educator who opens that door. And this bill ensures that every educator and every child is valued the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I do have a question because I live in a rural area. Are you experiencing right now the reality of childcare homes closing because the workforce is aging out? And do you expect that by professionalizing the profession, that you will attract young people to come and live in a rural area to start their own daycare?
I believe that all of that's true. When I first entered the field, if you made it 5 years, you got like thumbs up, you did it. Nobody does that. that's changed. The trajectory's changed. People are committed to coming in and staying in. When I work with career tech students, the obstacle is we need to go into a public school, even if they want to work with young children, because that's the only way their education will pay off. So there's a flip flop back and forth, in and out, and not stability of coming in, gaining expertise, starting a business, keeping a business, employing an assistant or anything else. So we need to make that pathway much more clear, much more direct, so you can go with your heart and go where you're going to commit and stay for the long term.
That's great insight. Do you have long waiting lists in your area like I do in mine?
Absolutely. I have a kind of flexible wait list because my children come in, and usually before there's a opportunity to fill a spot, those kids have aged out because it might be 3 years to get into my program or longer.
Thank you. Does anybody else at the table have questions for our witness? No. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate all the time that you've taken away from your program to join us. And if nobody has any questions, we will take a brief break because we need to be back around 11 o'clock. So let's say at 11:05. Thank you, Nick.